Welcome to another podcast from Pussy to Sea. My name is Paul, and as always, I am joined by Jeff.
Hello.
Hello. How are you today?
I am okay.
That is good, because today we are listening to Spare Parts, the audio drama from Big Finish.
Who would have guessed, based on our voices?
I would not have guessed at all.
I'm not sure how anyone would have guessed based on my Cyberman impression.
I'm out of breath from doing that. I don't know how cyber people do that sort of thing without having to draw breath. Mind you, that takes us into the first opening episode of Spare Parts. Dun, 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 dun.
So, should we give a bit of backstory on this one?
Yeah, go on then. Do the backstory, Jeff.
So this one is it's a Big Finish classic, really, isn't it? It's a Fifth Doctor adventure, almost 20 years old now. I believe it came out in July 2002.
I can't believe it's 20 years old. It is, yeah. 2002. It was out, yeah.
Listening to it again, not that long ago, ready for this podcast. It felt, now of the time, and it didn't feel old, if you know what I mean. And, kind of realizing how old it was, actually, I was like, wow, that is a long time ago. So this is a story that kind of serves as a bit of an origin for the Cybermen, doesn't it, really?
Some would say the definitive origin story of the cyber race. Indeed.
Yeah.
Certainly, it's the only audio, I think, that takes us deep into the heart of Mondas in its dying days as the Cybermen are born, so to speak.
Yes, that's it. And it was the sort of loose inspiration for couple of TV episodes, wasn't it, with the 10th Doctor, which was the Age of Steel and Rise of the Cybermen.
Yeah,
it's not.
I'm trying to still find those those parallels somewhere. But
we talked about it briefly before, didn't we? It's not like Human Nature or Family of Blood, which are sort of direct translation of the book, just about. But I think there's just a few kind of the themes of picking people up off the streets and stuff like that,
Yeah, and I guess a few nods in part 2 of that story, where they're in Battersea Power Station, which has been turned into a big cyber conversion factory. It does kind of echo the horror of Spare Parts, I think, in certain ways. So maybe that's it. And maybe also it's a way of saying a big thanks to Mark Platt, in a way, to give him the credit of actually coming up with Spare Parts, so acknowledging what he did with that, whilst at the same time saying, we're not going to use your story.
Yeah.
We love what you've done, Mark. We think it's brilliant. We think it's fantastic. Honestly, there's nothing that's going to touch it, but we're going to do our own thing. And just to make sure that there's no comebacks, we're going to set it in a parallel universe.
Yes,
Yours still applies. Don't worry. It's still canon, but actually ours is going to be on the TV. So, but thanks, mate. We'll give you credit on the closing caption.
That kind of brings up an interesting point, really, because obviously, if we're going on the assumption that Big Finish stuff is canon, which I believe it is, then this is an adventure that's happened to the Fifth Doctor.
Well, indeed.
But when we then have Human Nature in book form for the Seventh Doctor, and then it happens again on TV form for the 10th Doctor, isn't that just an adventure exactly the same as he had 3 regenerations ago? So do you know what I mean? It's
I do know what you mean. I suppose then it also depends whether you consider the Virgin New Adventures canon.
So
it's that whole thing, isn't it?
Exactly.
The whole debate on canon, it roars through the internet with as much energy as an unstoppable wildfire. Every time you think it's been put out, it will spark up somewhere else and get and be inflamed once more.
So I guess you the TV adventures are that's the prime stuff, and the assumption is that a large chunk of the audience won't have listened to a Big
I
Finish,
think
and
that's
they
probably the
won't have read
safest way to consider
a
it.
Virgin
Mm.
novel. So yeah, this story then takes place on Earth's long lost twin planet Mondas, doesn't it? Like you said,
Yes.
in its dying days, and it's they're sort of living. It reminded me a little bit of Zion in the Matrix sequels, which I know is
massive.
a couple of Paul's favourite films there. But it's they're underground, aren't they? Living close to the kind of the warmth that's left, in a sort of pretty miserable sounding city, which possibly was London, I think.
I think they did say it was London, didn't they?
Yeah, and then they're trying to get up onto the surface, aren't they, to kind of carry out some work.
The population, yes.
Yeah, and because it's so inhospitable, the only way to do it is by replacing parts and organs with cybernetic enhancements. I did sort of wonder, could they not just wear a suit? But then there's no story. But yeah, so that's what they're doing, isn't it? And tell me your views on the Cybermen in a minute, but I've always found them. I mean, they're one of my earliest memories from Silver Nemesis. I love that design of them, and how they look and how they talk, and the early versions like these ones that we see in 10th Planet and things, and most recently in like World Enough and Time are they're horrific, aren't they, really? It's
definitely.
sort of that bandaged head, and there's a bit in Spare Parts where the Doctor kind of obviously they're explaining things for the fact that we can't see anything, and he says that they look like earlier versions of themselves, and as they've gone on, particularly in the more modern era of the show, they've become kind of more sort of Terminator-like, haven't they? And Iron Man-like in their sort of persona, in the stomp, and all of that, and the unstoppable kind of killing machine. And then the Moffat ones just kind of look like silver Iron Men, really, didn't they?
Those nimble, quick-moving things.
Yes, they were, weren't they?
Silver.
And then the World Enough and Time ones were kind of real kind of body horror Cybermen again, and then obviously we've had a Shad in the recent years, who was a brilliant creation, a real kind of half man half machine sort of monstrosity, and he was fantastic, and I like the Cybermen again in there. It's they are sort of, they're a brilliant monster, and the whole concept of them is absolutely horrible when you think about it. And there's a scene, a couple of scenes in this audio particularly, that really kind of hit that home, I think. And do you remember the bit again in World Enough and Time where they're all sitting in a room and they turn the sound on, they're all going pain,
they're all screaming.
it's just it's awful. So they're sort of, you see them in the modern era, and they're all sleek and shiny and they look really cool, but then when you look back at what they're actually like and think about what they're meant to be, that's when the kind of horror of them really comes out. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the old Cybes.
Me too, actually. When I was growing up, I didn't see them on TV until the 80s in Earthshock. That was the first time I'd seen Cybermen on TV. So the whole 70s, sort of growing up with Tom Baker, and not a single Cyberman in sight, because I never saw Revenge of the Cybermen. I was too young for that, but I had read it. I'd read the Target book of it, and I'd read a whole bunch of other Cybermen stories throughout the second Doctor, and I'd read the 10th Planet as well. So, and one of the great things about the 10th Planet, and actually I think it's in Doctor Who and the Cybermen as well, actually, there's I think at the start of both of those novels, there's a sort of prologue which describes how the Cybermen came to be. The creation of the Cybermen.
Right.
And it's just a page and a half or so of italicized text, but it's really quite creepy. It's really something. I mean, bizarrely, I'm just looking at this one actually, which is the novelized target novel of the 10th Planet, and it starts centuries ago by our Earth time. A race of men on the far distant planet of Telos sought immortality. Well, that's wrong for a start, isn't it? So, and that's by Jerry Davis. So, what do we know? What does he know about anything? But what one of the so just dialing back a little bit. So the Cybermen always had, to me, a kind of legendary, almost mythical kind of vibe with them. I'd seen images of them and weird looking silver machines with giant space handles on the side there. Something about that design really creeps me out. So I'm talking about the Invasion Cybermen, and also actually the Revenge of the Cybermen, because their handles looked like a vacuum cleaner hose pipe, which it probably was
Yeah,
at the time,
it's a silver painted silver,
repurposed. But it's just something really, really weird about it. And I do remember when the Cybermen were revealed at the end of episode 1 of Earthshock, I went into a loony fit because I loved them. I thought, wow, we've got Cybermen. And to be fair, that story absolutely did them justice as a kind of intelligent, relentless race of somehow not quite so unemotional, alien super invaders, because the cyber leader in that arguably is driven by emotions. And I think that's always been a nice disparity between the concept of the Cybermen and their realization. The fact that, the Tom Baker story, for example, Revenge of the Cybermen, right? Cybermen gaining revenge. Well, revenge is an emotion, is an emotional reaction. It's a driver motivated by emotion completely. If you had no emotions, revenge wouldn't really matter to you. It's just, you wouldn't seek revenge. And to be fair, I'm not actually sure the Cybermen do seek revenge in that. It's just after eliminating something which could kill them at the end of this big cyber war. But the history of the cyber race has always fascinated me. I think David Banks, who played the cyber leader in the 80s, wrote a book about all the disparate kind of Genesis myths of the Cybermen and attempted to bring them all together. I haven't actually read it. I don't have it, but I did listen to it in audio format, and that was something. So yeah, they've always been a big sort of attraction for me. I've had nightmares about Cybermen and being attacked by Cybermen or becoming a Cyberman. And I think you're right, Jeff. I think they do kind of peel away the darkest body horror. It's never really done it in the TV series, I don't think, not much until recently, until we saw the rise of Age of Steel and Rise of the Cybermen, and again, like you said, in The World Enough in Time and The Doctor Falls. But Spare Parts goes at it and does not hold back. It fully exposes the muscle and sinew of the cyber creation.
And I think when they were sort of first created, this idea of electronic or machine implants and things into a human body was probably quite new, wasn't it?
I think it was in its infancy. Yeah.
And so the sort of fear of that helped kind of inform and shape the monsters. But even today, it's probably more relevant than ever, even if sort of people getting fillers and surgery and all of that sort of stuff, and changing the your body and things on that level, as well as just getting a new hip or whatever put in. But the dad character in this, he's got the heart unit, isn't he?
That's right.
Pacemaker or whatever. So it's, you can kind of see the I was going to say inspiration for the Cybermen all around in some ways, but it's sort of, they're obviously they're a lot older than Kim Kardashian's
implants.
So yeah, the story starts, isn't it? They're sending a guy up to the surface, aren't they? And it's done like an old sort of newsreel type piece. It
is, and almost like a moon landing in some ways, isn't it? Which it obviously plays off of.
Yeah, he's the great hope
kind of
for
subverts
everything.
it. Yes, we're going up onto a surface, but actually, it's the surface of our own planet. That's the big adventure.
Yeah, and it doesn't go very well for him, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, he has a bit of a seizure, and
Yeah.
yeah.
So Nyssa and the Doctor land on. Well, they don't know that it's Earth straight away, do they? The Doctor is pretty sure that it is, but she's not convinced, is she?
She's not convinced. No, she's not convinced that the Doctor's convinced. I think, isn't it? She senses that he's not quite telling the truth, or that he does know where it is, but it's certainly not Earth. And the Doctor's trying to be quite flippant and buoyant about the whole thing. I think he knows immediately where he is, and just needs a bit of confirmation that he is actually on Mondas. Because I think there's a line he says when Nyssa darts off somewhere, and he goes, "I used to be such a good liar."
Yeah, he does, and actually just before that, he doesn't he say something like we should get out of here, which
He does, yeah,
happens
yeah.
occasionally with the Doctor. I'm just thinking there's a bit with the 13th Doctor where she does similar to this, which is we need to get out of here. Although I can't think what episode it was in right now, but then in this one, Fifth Doctor is fairly quickly, well, we'll just stay half an hour,
Yeah.
and that's when you think. That's where you've gone wrong,
Yeah, that old chestnut.
Yeah.
Well,
Didn't turn into half an hour, does it?
so, yeah.
So they split up, don't they? And go and investigate. And this is where we first meet Mr. Hartley and the daughter Yvonne. And there's a brother, isn't there? A son. I can't remember what his name is off the top of my head.
His name is Frank, I believe.
Yeah. So this is they're trying to catch a Cyberman, aren't they? That's in the house.
Yeah. So Dad is a mat catcher.
That's it. Yeah.
Isn't it? Which is brilliant. One thing I love about these is how it feeds in the language that we know from the cyber race, right?
Yeah.
It's because I'll just do the side here actually, because okay, so we get the mat catcher.
Yeah,
beautiful,
because they think that it's 1950s London initially, don't they? So that is of that era.
Yeah, and it's dark. It's almost it's electric, but it almost has a kind of gaslight kind of feel to it, doesn't it? It's cold. There's mist. There's a curfew in place. Don't let the police catch you, and don't be out. It's really dangerous. And I love the fact that in those opening sort of 20 minutes or so, things are revealed slowly.
Yeah.
And we don't jump in with great explanations. We come to involve ourselves in this world and its language and its ways by degrees. And we've got a kind of overview. We know it's a Cyberman story. We know this is Mondas, right? We're told that on the back of the blurb. And we know it's going to be the genesis of the Cybermen. So we kind of, as viewers, have that sort of, or as listeners, have that sort of tension going on. How's this going to play out now?
Yeah,
what's the story?
Yeah.
How are we going to see the Cybermen become Cybermen? And what's the framework for that? What's the context of it? And the context is fantastically done, absolutely brilliantly, because I mean, on a simple level, one thing that's always kind of freaks me out a little bit is thinking about the very term Cyberman. Why not cyber women? I think cyber women have been mentioned, but only as a kind of a kinky thing in the past, and a certain episode of Torchwood, which is probably best left unmentioned, so I won't do that again. But it's why this obsession with the kind of patriarchal pronoun of everything's a man, and yet as we sort of understand, as we get to understand the world, we have Dr. Man, right, and we have Sister Man, so it suddenly starts to make sense that there would certainly be a Cyberman as well. Why don't we have cyber women? And the only reason that the only way we've ever seen cyber women is in some kind of kinky side story somewhere.
Yeah.
And so why do we have Cyberman? And Mark Platt rationalizes it because we have a title, Doctor Man, and we have Sister Man, and both those characters are women. So the term man is just a kind of a sort of catch-all sort of appendix to a job title.
Yeah. It's it's not kind of gender specific, really, is it?
But in the same way that we would have policeman and fireman, we have Doctor Man and we have Sister Man. But whereas we would make the difference between policewoman firewoman. But actually, do we have firewomen? We do have firewomen, but do we call them firewomen or do we call them firemen still?
I don't know.
I don't know. Firefighting
Anyone?
personnel, perhaps.
Yeah.
Maybe we're sort of growing past the whole pronoun gender specific pronouns in job titles, but
Yeah.
Mondas obviously simplified the whole thing by just calling everybody man at the end of it. That's
Yeah.
it. So which means that when we get Cyberman, and it makes sense. There's a context to it, So, but I think deeper than that, what we've already got is a society that is kind of getting rid of its differences in some way, right? Because obviously the cyber race, they all look the same, they all behave the same, they all perform to the same subset of rules. So already we've started to see those behaviors within the society itself. So again, it's like the cyber race becomes an extension of the Mondas race of people and their mores and their attitudes and their everything that describes their livelihood. It's quite chilling, really. There is no hope in this story. There is literally no glimmer of light, and any light that exists is very quickly snuffed out.
It is. Even when we meet Mr. Hartley and Yvonne and Frank, but not so much Frank, but the other two, they're quite kind of upbeat, aren't they? And there's quite a nice relationship they've got there.
Which is nice. I think we need to see that, actually.
Yeah. But even that is, like you're saying, snuffed out, kind of
it's reduced
tragically in a really kind of awful, scene a bit later. So the Doctor is out exploring, isn't he? And he finds a shop that's shut, and is that the first time when they sort of find out about curfew and all of that? And the chap there his name's Dodd, isn't it? And he's
Thomas Dodd.
He's sort of a surgeon, isn't he? Fitting body parts and stuff. He reminded me a little bit actually of Doc Ido in Alita, because that's kind of what he does in that. Except Ido's not creepy. And he's amazed that the Doctor has got no enhancements, isn't he? And he wants to talk to him about the city and everything, don't they?
He's an interesting character, actually, because obviously what the kind of environment I think that Mark Platt is dipping into here is, I think you said it's like 1950s London type thing, isn't it? That sort of post-war or even during the war kind of blitz. And the character of Dodd struck me as your kind of archetypal spiv character. Someone who's a little bit seedy. He's got loads of things going on in the background. Just step out here, Doctor. We'll sort you out. We'll get some. Oh yeah, you got a nice set of teeth on you there, all your own. I can probably make something out of those. He's looking for an opportunity, something he can turn into a profit, sell and make a profit. Buying and selling, that kind of character, I think. And he does have this shop of spare parts, doesn't he? Which has got a massive room at the back with things hanging up in bags, which we find out later on. But he's a lovely character. He's quite endearing, actually.
He is.
He's
he's
finding his way through this really dark world.
He's a bit shady rather than creepy,
shady.
but he's not an unpleasant guy as such, is he? So we get a bit more activity with the Hartleys, don't we, and Nyssa.
We do, and again, it's so Nyssa kind of goes to, or is brought back to the Hartley's house because she sort of saves Dad Hartley, doesn't she? The roof collapses on him or something, and she sort of digs him out, resuscitates him, and gets his heart going again. Even though she thinks that actually he ought to be dead. Yeah,
she's surprised, isn't she?
Surprised that he survived that. That's the thing. But nonetheless, she's sort of credited with helping him survive, and as a favour they sort of bring back. She doesn't want to go back, she doesn't want to impose. She's really polite. I love Nyssa. She's so polite, and she doesn't want to put these people in trouble, but they insist she can't be out after dark, so they've got to get back to her house. And then we go back to their house, and it's sort of like a kind of normal northern domestic kind of family setting, isn't it? All right, I put tree on, put kettle on, let's make a brew. And they do have that very definite sort of northern dialect thing going on.
Yeah, they did, and it was all quite.
Can't do it, Dad. Don't make me do it. She's got to go. She's putting us all in danger.
But that's it. Frank wants to be called up, doesn't he, to kind of volunteer for what I guess at the time, they don't really quite realise how awful it's going to be.
He's going to be a hero if he puts on the
he
suit
does,
and breaks through to the surface of the planet.
And he talks about wanting a call up, doesn't he, with the sister man, and she says he's not old enough for it. But amongst all the kind of gloom of everything else, this felt quite nice and warm and sort of cozy here, didn't it? Which again, when things happen later, is even more awful. So Nyssa, she wants to leave, doesn't she? And much like with the Doctor and Dodd, they won't let her because it's after hours, isn't it? So she kind of has to stay.
Which Frank's not happy about, but Yvonne likes the idea of it.
I was going to say, her and
identify with, almost like a sister.
Her and Yvonne have got quite a nice relationship, haven't they? They sort of they get on quite nicely, don't they?
But Yvonne's not well, is she? She's coughing and spluttering a little bit. She's a bit sickly.
Sisterman Constant makes a phone call, doesn't she? We don't really know who's at the other end, but she's sort of out patrol. Well, they do patrol, don't they, to see who's out and about, and she reports that there's a stranger at the house. So Sisterman Constant has kind of visited the family, hasn't she? Had a little word with them and everything, and I wasn't quite sure as to what sort of role she was, and I think I understood by the end of it that it was almost a kind of quasi-religious role, like literally like a sister, like a nun or something, but with not a very humanitarian outlook on things, really. Just a kind of almost like a recruiting tool, wasn't she? Like a recruiter. And again, we've got these parallels between things that we know on Earth, and particularly in sort of Western British society, where we've got this history of through the war and the post-war, where we've got recruiters, and we've got police on horseback, and we've got nuns, and we've got doctors and surgeons, but they're all very different here. And even as well, we've got Christmas, and it seems to have a sort of Christmassy atmosphere, isn't it? There's some sort of unspecified holiday, which we take to be a bit like Christmas. They've got a tree, they've got lights, they're putting up decorations, so we can immediately relate to it and place ourselves within that world, and it feels familiar. And through that familiarity, those small differences become bright and at the same time dark. It's like a dark light shining through these things that really creep you out. It's Mark Platt at his best throughout this, I have to say. Yeah, he has done a really good job here.
The world building, isn't it? That's what it is, So for anyone, I'm sure most of our listeners probably know who Mark Platt, the writer of this, is, and things he's done. So he's responsible for and one of my all-time favourite TV Sylvester McCoy stories, Ghostlight, which the first time I saw that, I was blown away by it. And every time I watch it, I find something new to unearth. And he's done a couple of novels as well. He did New Adventures called Time's Crucible, part of the Cat's Cradle trilogy, which was equally dense and almost unreadable, to be honest. But
really?
He's novelized a few other writers' stories as well. But one thing about Mark Platt is everything he writes is very considered. When you're at school and you're sort of learning poetry and literature and stuff like that, and the teacher points out similes and metaphors and says, well, this is what the writer intended, and you'll think, I know they didn't. How on earth do you make those connections? The blue is blue. He's not talking about the sky and everything else. It's just the color blue. Well, no. With Mark Platt, he absolutely means those deeper things. He's almost like James Joyce. He's the James Joyce of the Doctor Who writers' room. And James Joyce knew exactly what he was writing. Every word was considered. Every meaning, every interlaced element within the structure of a narrative was deliberate, and it's exactly the same with Mark Platt. I'd be really surprised if he said, I wrote it all by accident, it just sort of came together. No. I've listened to this guy in interviews. He knows exactly what he's writing, and the narrative in this is as dense as anything, but rich and full of rewards.
You can tell that this this world in it is, it's meticulously planned and designed to be certain ways and things. Yeah, it's not just kind of, they turn up somewhere.
Together, is it?
No, there really is a whole lot of world building, going
definitely
on here with this. So after that, a bit, the Doctor, he wants to get back to the TARDIS, isn't he? And this is where we get what I think is quite a well-known sort of visual is the Cyberman, although not quite converted yet, but riding on a horse. Which also made me think a bit of the Sontarans wanting to ride a horse in
retrospect.
recently.
This predates that. But, I love that.
Maybe Chibs took a bit.
And it's a cyber horse as well. It's been augmented in some way, hasn't it? It's had replacements added to it. Again, quite a sort of horrible, image and thought there, So the Doctor, he runs, isn't he, with Dodd, whilst the Cybermen are kind of calling for, putting out like an APB for them, aren't they? That's right, yeah. And I think they're I'm sounding like a Cyberman myself, like there are, but they're almost Cybermen, and the Doctor notes it, doesn't he? He's like, they're not quite there yet.
They haven't got the bandaged head
and the
stuff.
Hands, but they're literally just a few steps away from the full conversion thing.
Maybe think about their well, of course the first design, but the big boxy chest piece and stuff like that. And
definitely, and also those things we saw in World Enough and Time, and the Doctor falls in the hospital. Those screaming patients in the bed. This is exactly that world, I think, that we saw in that episode. That's a slice of Mondas straight from Spare Parts, I think, shoved into that spaceship. I thought it was brilliant the way they referenced that. So when Nyssa and the Doctor get back together, they start having a bit of an argument as to what they should do. So do they help these people? Because they're clearly on a one-way road to absolute destruction, or do they, do they leave them be? Because obviously the Cybermen, they are a thing. They're a big force in the Doctor Who universe, and there would be consequences if they didn't actually exist. So if the Doctor and Nyssa help them and they don't become Cybermen, then all those things that the Cybermen did and all the effects of that, the good stuff as well as the bad, never comes to pass. It's almost like that sort of genesis of the Daleks moment.
That's exactly it.
In these creatures, and how can you even ask yourself that? Of course you must. And but do I have the right? It's a similar kind of thing here again, isn't it? Because, but there's a moral standpoint which Nyssa is absolutely unshaken on. They have to help these people, because regardless of whatever happens in the wider universe, these are real people here. They've got names now. They've got lives. They've got families. And there are whatever's going to happen to them happens to these people that they now know, and that puts a different spin on it. And the Doctor has to kind of go with it, really. He clearly doesn't want to. He knows there's going to be trouble. He doesn't have any idea how this is going to play out, and then just kind of throws himself into it in typical Fifth Doctor fashion.
That's what I was going to say. And of course, for him, it ends up having a great big personal cost, doesn't it? In some ways, and I think Nyssa, having met the family and particularly Yvonne, it was a really good way of developing that the connection with people and seeing that in the story these are real people, and they can't they can't let them fall victim to everything, even though it's that old thing of, well, do you save a handful of people for more? Do you know what I mean? What do you do here? So it's quite a
it's a conundrum for sure.
Quandary. And I would. The right thing to do is help people, isn't it? But the Doctor's right. What does the impact of doing that have on the rest of time and things? But you could argue, no Cybermen is better. you know.
I think of all the people that they, again, like the Daleks, isn't it? All the people they slaughtered, all the people Cybermen converted, all the
but that's it. They
planets
they
destroyed in their
they
march
turn them
through the
into
universe.
themselves, don't they? But they're still, they're still deleting people and getting rid of them, aren't they? There's nothing there.
and it's kind of interesting, sort of watching this back, having watched recent Cyberman stories. So the in particular, was it the Timeless Child two-parter at the end? What's that Cyberman story?
Oh, it's Ascension of the Cybermen.
Ascension of the Cybermen. There you go. So that those two stories there, where we have the last remnants of humanity at the end of the cyber war, don't we? We've got the remains of the cyber race and we've got the remains of humanity. And it's been a brutal war. And I think Big Finish have dipped into that cyber war a few times as well. I think Sword of Orion, which I think was before this one, it might have been slightly after, but the Eighth Doctor story is great. I mean, I love that. But we digress. So the idea is that the Doctor thinks, okay, well, I can do something. If I can't directly interfere, let's help the people help themselves. So he starts the church bells ringing, hoping that it will kind of lead to some sort of insurrection, which I think it does. There's a lot of shouting going on. It's very difficult sometimes with audios to really get a flavour of exactly what's going on. I think, like you, I remember this because I think we might listen to it around about the same time. Driving.
We were
driving to somewhere in the middle of the country from our different locations to do a job together, and we both said we'll listen to Spare Parts on the way up. And I wasn't going to, but I did. And it was that moment where it's quite windy outside. It was getting dark, and this thing was unfolding around me in the car. And thankfully, I was able to concentrate on most of it, but just a few bits when I came to roundabouts and things.
And then you get a bit down the road.
Actual driving.
You get down the road, and you're like, I've missed something.
That's it. That's it. But I think I got most of it. So there's an awful lot of shouting. There's an insurrection. There's some police kind of trying to regain control of things. There's some things being thrown, and it does. There is some sort of upset going on. But I kind of suspect that actually that's the Doctor helping the whole cyber conversion process in the end, because he sort of draws attention to himself. He forces the Central Committee, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a minute, to take action, and brings himself to the notice of the notorious Doctorman Alan, who comes in part 2, right? Played by the rather magnificent Sally Nivette from Blake 7. She was Janet in Blake 7. Did you ever watch Blake 7?
No, I haven't. No.
Missing out there, mate.
No, I know.
You got to watch it. You got to watch it. We should do a Blake 7 podcast. Whenever Jeff gets round to watching Blake 7, we'll do it episode by episode. Hook me up for that. Let us know. Tweet in, dear listeners.
So it all kicks off a bit here, doesn't it? Because people weren't supposed to go up to the church tower, were they? So once that bell starts ringing, that's sort of something is going on, isn't it? And so everyone starts kind of not rioting, but coming out of their houses and stuff like that. The cyber police try to sort of stop everything, don't they? And it doesn't really it doesn't work.
But they do start getting quite violent, don't they?
I was going to say that they do start
people.
Exactly. So the Doctor and Nyssa have a bit of a Barney about Adric, don't they? Here as well.
Yeah.
And there's quite a lot of guilt and pain there, and I wonder if Nyssa's sort of desire to do something is partly born out of the fact that Adric died, essentially at the hands of the Cybermen, and the Doctor is probably torn in wanting to do the same, but fearful of the the greater impact of everything.
And again, if he does act here, why didn't he act to go back and save Adric in some way?
That's what she asks him, isn't it? Why didn't you do something?
Because he must be thinking, actually, if I can do this, then I could have done that, but I didn't. So the guilt that the Doctor would be carrying from that, and the remorse would be really, really something. It's an interesting thing, actually, just that whole thing with Adric and the Cybermen and the Doctor, because I think whenever we've had Cybermen done well in subsequent stories, and I think particularly because you mentioned it, the Ashad story, the Haunting of Villa Diodati, it's there is a passion that the Doctor has when it comes to facing off against the Cybermen, because we've had Adric, which was the big thing, and then we had Bill in at the end of the 12th Doctor,
which 13 referenced, didn't she?
Exactly. And those two deaths have really affected the Doctor big time, and they've all been at the hands of Cybermen. Cybermen. So it's I think there is a special electricity when the Doctor comes up against Cybermen in a really good story. I think certain stories they possibly haven't been used brilliantly. They've just been stomping robots.
Yeah.
And we've kind of lost that edge that they probably should have, but haven't always exhibited. But I think that's just the nature of Doctor Who, and the kind of just having stories written by various writers who want to tell a different story.
Yeah,
It's not about Cybermen. Cybermen are more of a vehicle, whereas where they've been really important, the story has been about Cybermen. The Ashad story and this story and Earthshock, and they are absolutely what they are, and what they do is essential to the story that plays out.
So there's a bit more Cyberman action here, isn't there?
Oh yeah, little Matty goes missing.
That's it. Yeah, Yvonne gives it to Nyssa, doesn't she? And
She
he's sort of
takes it in
thinking,
the
oh,
TARDIS.
it's like a cute little kid.
She doesn't know.
Doesn't know, does she? She thinks it's just a
Nobody
little
knows
toy.
what this thing is. It's just and the Mondasians don't think anything of them, do they? They're just mats, and it's never really explained what they really are or how they came to be. I think it's hinted at in certain ways, but again, that's what I love about Mark Platt stories. He never explains anything.
I was thinking about it in relation to
things
on the show, and you see people online saying, "Oh, we didn't get an explanation for this, or we didn't get more of this." But I don't think you. And I'm not being critical. I just don't think you always need it. And also,
I agree.
There is a time limit on stuff.
Yeah.
I don't need a backstory about how the Cybermats were invented. Perhaps it was a toy that they made that that the kids had, and it got corrupted and
evolved somehow. And
Cybernet took over, and they've gone bonkers. So I think they're there and they're part of that world. When we were talking about the world building and how good it all is, but there is a limit to what you can do. I think before you end up having to explain everything in rich detail.
And Mark Platt often pushes past that limit, I think. He doesn't really worry about explanations if it's not. I mean, Mark Platt tends to write in. He seems to love rich symbolism and pulling parallels from. In order to create an atmosphere. And almost in a way kind of tell a story in a very shorthand sort of way. So he'll tell us, something will happen more by implication than by description, or even showing us. It's just bringing in certain symbols and certain kind of archetypes and things, and just putting them in the right places implies that a story is happening that does this, but I don't need to tell it because you get it. You all understand those symbols. It's a common language. So let's move on and do some more rich atmospheric world building and stuff.
Yeah.
So horror.
The body horror, yeah, I always like a bit of that. So I thought that there was a bit of tension between the committee that you mentioned earlier and Dr. Manallan. So her job is to sort of she's
overseeing the
program,
isn't she?
Get everything moving is what I was going to say. And she says something along the lines of, we need to save the people, and the committee are wanting to speed things up, aren't they? And people are dying, and they need
as it kind of plays out. That's
and she doesn't kind of want to push it that way, does she? And the committee say, we must survive, and so it's that sort of the cyber brain, the cyber commando. I know that's not quite what it is here, but it's already
the initials are the same, aren't they? Central Committee, CC, Cyber Controller. It's essentially one of those things, big giant cyber brain coordinator, everything.
And it's already and it's developing on its own in theory, and it's got its own goals, and she's just there to help reach those for it now. They don't care about actually saving humans. They want to save themselves now.
But again, it's like it's how the technology is kind of repurposed at certain ways and evolves through that repurposing into something that it was that maybe people would never have seen coming. It's something sneaking up on you, when it blindsides you, right? So you have a technology. Okay, so I think that the progress is right. Everyone's living underground, so there's no there's limited resources, air, water, fuel, all that sort of stuff is just dwindling, and it can't be replaced quickly, and very quickly it's not being replaced at all. So they're going to run out of resources. So the only way they think they can get up to it is at the top. So you've got two things. So you've got, firstly, how do we keep people alive? So we can replace certain organs with spare parts. We can replace the hearts and lungs and various other things. So that will keep people alive long enough to keep procreating, hopefully. But then, of course, we're going to burn up resources longer. So then you get this vicious circle there. So, okay, what else do we need? Well, we need to get to the surface, right? So we've got to break through somehow. Well, the environment is hostile. We're somehow traveling through deep space. We're well out of our normal orbit. It's just cold out there. It's vacuum. There's nothing. But there might be some resources that we can dig top down. So we've got to build an environmental suit to protect people as we go up there. Okay, so we've already done the spare parts thing. So what about we take that a little bit further and we really build the environment around the person? And then you can kind of see how it sort of evolves. It kind of just and again, like we just said, it's never explained that that's the evolution, and that's maybe just my interpretation of it, pulling from the certain clues and snippets that are dropped in. But suddenly everything becomes about the race for full conversion. At a point within the story, it reaches that pivot point. The Central Committee decides that this is actually the only way it is going to survive, regardless of the people. It's going to survive through these people if they're converted, and that becomes its overriding goal. So the whole program is kind of either subverted or accelerated towards that end.
You could look at it like once the obsession with plastic surgery begins for some people, it doesn't end.
Exactly. It becomes it's a self-fulfilling goal then, doesn't it? It's the end of everything.
And how much of that what was it? Is it Theseus's ship, but in human form? How much of that person is left that's original? But I think that's quite that they become sort of obsessed with the conversion and everything, don't they? And developing all of that.
But I love the fact that Dr. Mulholland is really embittered by the whole thing. She's a cynic. She drinks, she pretty much swears, and she's not happy with anything, and she's just, she's doing it because and all the words she says are just dark. They're all very nihilistic. There's nowhere to go. There's a wonderful line she said, which is something like, we're in a pit and it's going to get darker, or something like that. Of course it's going to get darker. We're in a pit, or something like that. I should have listened back and wrote it down because it was brilliant, and that which kind of sums up the whole story. Everything happens in a closed system. There is no way out.
No, and the way out isn't working.
No, that's it. And the way out is full conversion.
Yeah,
that's it. Really, isn't it?
Which is not really a good way out.
Not really a way out at all. It's a way to survive, but is it a way for the AI to survive? Really, there's that thing. It's and we mate. Just while we're on the subject of the Central Committee / Cyber Controller thing, the sound on that thing is absolutely brilliant. We remarked on this, didn't we?
We did. I said it was so robotic and kind of electronic sounding. I couldn't kind of make out everything.
I think that's the idea, isn't it? It's the sound comes at you. It's got volume. It's got mass, and it's disparate. It's like different voices coming at you. All massively ramped up with the electronic sort of reverbs and stuff, and heavily over treated and right up there into the red levels. But I love it. It has a real alien feel to it. That just honestly, I think it's brilliant, and I think it does really become clearer in each time it appears. And right towards the end, all the voices seem to come together in unison. But those early things when it just blasts through the was it a palace or something, the Central Palace, and it just fills the world, and it is astonishingly good.
That's a good point, actually. It did get easier to kind of figure out what was being said, and maybe it was because I was getting better at kind of deciphering it, as the machine had as the committee had become more developed, it was more kind of streamlined and coherent. So we mentioned this earlier, but there's a lot to talk about in this story, and I think we should just kind of look at the main big points. But one of them is when Yvonne gets the call up, isn't it?
Yeah,
we did mention earlier, and
yeah.
Frank is really not happy about
He's not
that.
happy about it at all.
And there's that bit where System and Constant is looking through the lines of people that are going to be processed, and Yvonne is there, and she wants to know when she's going to get her uniform because she can't wait for her dad to see her in it. And it's like going to the school play or something and waiting for your parents to see, and she's all really excited about it, and it's just got no idea what's to befall her later. Paul, let's talk about Yvonne for a minute. We've mentioned her a few times now, and she really has quite a tragic story in this, isn't she? She's sort of filled with hope
awful.
and things, and sort of despite the crappy world that they're in, she's a positive soul, and then gets the call up, and then is obviously converted, and she makes her way home, doesn't she? At some point, and her dad is he's broken by it, isn't he? She's she's some sort of half converted monstrosity who can't sort of breathe properly or talk properly, and it's just it
goes on as well, doesn't it? Her wails and sort of cries of terror and fear.
It reminded me, this was the bit probably that most reminded me of Age of Steel, where the Doctor has got the Cyberman in the tunnel thing, whatever it is, and it hasn't quite. Has it got a broken inhibitor, emotion inhibitor, or hasn't been fitted or something? And it's a woman inside, isn't it? And she's looking for her fiance, isn't it, at the wedding day or something? And she's cold and confused. And we talked a bit about this on another podcast, but some people think that Doctor Who is it's not genuinely scary, and I think if you're young, it quite probably is. But I think if you are grown up like we are, in theory, but you can look at something and understand and see why it is scary, and often, as in this instance, it's more psychological. I'm not kind of it's not horrible visuals looking at the Cybermen particularly, but that thought of being trapped in a body that isn't yours, and you don't know what's going on, and God, it's just I said it before, but it's just awful, and the stuff with Yvonne is horrible, and you see the the impact, like it breaks the dad, and we don't often see what happens when people are killed by a monster in the show, do we?
No, we don't.
Which obvious reasons, time, etc.
Family show.
Family show. Let's not go too horrible,
all that kind of stuff. I think with this one, this is probably the first time we'd really properly seen cyber conversion. I know before this we'd had so there wasn't anything in Earthshock, but Attack of the Cybermen had a sort of half converted Commander Lytton, the mercenary with who'd been in Resurrection of the Daleks, and that was quite a kind of horror scene, but it was quite mild. I think that, there were letters of complaint to the BBC because there was blood, on the hands, that squeezes brains out or something, and that wasn't the done thing on Doctor Who. So you can see how delicate these things are. But Spare Parts is the first time we really go on that journey all the way into the conversion process and get that. And there's that moment with Yvonne, isn't there? She's kind of led through, and we do see it, I think, in Rise of the Cybermen, where they go back to see Power Station and all the blades come down.
It's sort of
Parts, you get like a similar kind of sound effect. As you just have to imagine it. And I think back then I did imagine it to be like whirling blades and everything just chopping her up into pieces and taking bits off and replacing them with other things, and just it's vivid without being descriptive. It just brings it in through use of the sound.
That's it. And you picture it in your head, and it's probably quite horrific. But on the TV show, it was almost a little bit cartoony.
I think it kind of had to be, though.
Exactly, it had to be.
The full horror of it is just nasty.
But what's going on inside those cubicles, as it were, would have been pretty pretty grim.
But of course, in an audio, designed
Yeah,
for
it's as
anyone who's going to be crazy enough to pick it up, it doesn't need a
it
certificate
becomes
on it.
as
Yeah,
horrible as you want it to be.
yeah,
Um,
that's it.
so why don't we look a bit more towards the end of
For sure,
yeah,
yes.
because dear listeners, we could go through every beat of the story, but we're sure that you've A, possibly listened to this before, and B, not got 6 hours to listen to us talk it through. So yeah, like we said earlier, this really is genesis of the Cybermen, isn't it? And the genesis of them comes from the most unexpected of sources in some ways, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah, because Dr. Allen suddenly sees that the Doctor himself could actually provide the key to a successful cyber program,
Yeah.
and manages to convince the Central Committee that that's the way they ought to go as well. I think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And actually, because he's an alien, doesn't matter. No Mondasians get hurt in the process, so she can experiment on him to her heart's content.
Yeah.
Take bits out of him, mess things around,
Yeah.
and do whatever the hell she wants.
Yeah, and maybe his his biology could become quite helpful for them.
Yeah, which again
eventually.
kind of sort of prefigures the
Cyber
Time
Masters.
Lord cyber people.
Cyber Lords, yeah.
Cyber, is that what they're called?
Yeah,
Cyber Lords?
Cyber Lords, isn't
Anyway,
it? Yeah.
Time Lords.
Which I really, yeah, yeah. I thought they were great. That was a sort of typically kind of crazy master scheme, and there's been the Daleks versus Cybermen in the show. That was kind of a myth, wasn't it? That didn't actually happen on screen until Doomsday and things, an army of ghosts, and so the kind of mixing things together, it seems a bit like, actually, why has this never happened before? Why do we not have sea warriors and ice, sea devils and ice warriors together? But yeah, I liked the the Cyber Lords, something that can just keep regenerating inside and live on. It's quite a good but gross concept. So yeah, they want to use the Doctor, don't they? In the end here.
Yeah, she does, and it all kind of goes to pot at the end, doesn't it? I mean, the climax of this story is really something. It's like, System and Constant becomes converted as well, does she not?
Yeah.
I think the Central Committee goes absolutely wild, achieves a kind of unity, becomes clear on its purpose and its direction, orders then that everybody should just kind of pile in. The atmosphere is being vented. There's mists forming as what's left of the air is getting blown out of into space. There's buildings collapsing. The whole world, which has always been terminal anyway, just becomes increasingly so.
Fall into pieces,
in on itself into a singularity, like a.
We see Dodd again, don't we? From earlier in the story, he's been converted, but he if I remember rightly, he seems to sort of maintained. The Doctor knows it's him, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So, somehow,
and that's it. And clearly, this is the other thing which I think the new series has done quite well. Actually, it's the conversion process isn't always perfect.
No.
It doesn't actually always eliminate emotions. And if that's down to a faulty inhibitor chip or whatever. It doesn't really matter. The fact is, and it kind of explains why we get a somewhat emotional cyber leader in Earthshock, and similarly in Revenge of the Cybermen as well. That it's almost like, despite the quotation fingers aspiration to become driven by logic devoid of emotion, the genesis of these people is that they are human, and we see them being human, and the strength of that humanity. Even the worst aspects of humanity, as we've seen with Ashad, they can still carry through the conversion, and still drive. And we see the positive aspects of humanity kind of really sort of being the end of Yvonne. And maybe there's a thing to be said that if humanity survives in this form, it's the negative aspects of it that will actually carry us through, which is really bleak. But yeah, in keeping with the themes of the story, in a way, that's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah,
Don't you think that we will survive as a race purely because we've got a bunch of psychopaths amongst our population? I did read somewhere that that humanity's survival has actually depended on psychopaths in back in the distant past. There are times when if humanity ever faced an extinction event and it had to battle for survive, right? All the soppy lovies like me and you, Jeff, we wouldn't last 5 minutes. I'm afraid. You know, we're not hunter killers. You know, we wouldn't bash somebody's brains out, or it would take a lot for us to actually bash somebody's brains out with a blunt instrument. Whereas you psychopath, well, that's what they do in their day job. So you know, when it comes to survival, at the extremes of humanity's road,
you know,
they're the ones who are going to carry us through.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I just watched Walking Dead last night, and you know, that is exactly
It's
that.
a grim
You know,
thought, isn't it? It's a
it's the
pretty horrific
apocalypse,
thought.
and you know, we have our heroes in that show, but actually, you know, okay, that you know, they're not all people in it, but you know, how heroic actually are they? You know, because of what they're doing, it's done to survive. And you know, Rick Grimes, when he was in it, you know, was the sort of, you know, the hero, but actually was he as bad as the sort of baddies that, you know, he was, you know, trying to take down to protect his family and things. And you know, you get put into certain situations and you're forced to do certain things, aren't you? And you know, yeah, if you're delicate flowers like we are, you know, you're not going to survive. But yeah, that's really interesting. You know, the world will be populated by nutters because when the apocalypse comes, there's an idea for a film there.
Yeah, come the zombie apocalypse
nutter. Yeah. So the there was one thing in the spare parts here. They're pouring wine into the back pocket of the committee or something.
Sort of make them drunk.
Yeah, and I
pissed up psychopaths then in that
case. Staggering all over the place. I must have slightly missed why they were doing that when I was listening whilst driving. But I was like, what? Why are they pouring wine into it?
It's oh gosh, I can't remember now. There's like some sort of vat of nutrients, isn't it? And the doctor wants to contaminate it with something to change or delay the evolution of the cyber planet, or the central committee. I think it is a cyber planet by now, isn't it? At the end of it, and the only thing they've got that can possibly have any possible effect is Dr. Manallen's stash of wine. And they just literally start smashing bottles and throwing them in there, don't they? And it does seem to have some sort of effect on the Mondasian cyber people. So,
it's the sort of one that probably needs another listen to.
Maybe.
Certainly that last episode to kind of take it all in. But yeah, it ends with you know, the planet kind of. But they're not people anymore, are they? It's a whole new race, really, getting ready to kind of.
Yeah, that's right. I do remember now. So because they've sort of changed the cyber planet, or done it in, they do kill it, don't they? Or they do they not kill it? They knock it back a bit anyway. At the very least, they don't actually kill it, but they might actually kill it. But then Hartley's still there, isn't he, at the end of it? And he's put in charge of sort of a reconstruction project. So I think it's a thing where the doctor thinks, okay, so we haven't actually destroyed the Cybermen, but maybe we've changed them into something. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so they kind of, so he and Nyssa sort of leave the remnants of Mondas on a bit of an upbeat.
It's a bit more positive, Mr. Hartley tells the doctor that they're going to use some notes to try to reverse the processing and add some more humanity back into the Cybermen.
There you go.
So they leave, and then we have another scene where they haven't looked at the doctor's notes, and System and Constant tells Dr. Manallen that the logical course would be to increase the processing, and they have a new future thanks to the Doctor, and it ends with Dr. Manallen, we begin again. So my kind of interpretation was that the Doctor has helped them, but they're not interested in putting the humanity back in, and
Well,
they
one of the Cybermen has survived, doesn't he? Zeng,
yeah,
Zeng. We will survive.
yeah,
I don't need to put any effects on that.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and it's yeah, we begin again. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's
so I liked this story. This is a story that I
mm,
I said I liked it. I do, and I would listen to it again at some point. It's been years since I've listened to it.
yeah, same.
But it's not one to enjoy. Do you know what I mean? Because there's
Yeah,
it's bleak and it's tragic with Yvonne and
mm,
that family getting torn apart and the doctor is sort of forced to help forced to create the Cybermen in some ways. It's almost this sort of opposite of Genesis of the Daleks, isn't it? Where the Doctor has got the opportunity to stop them, and in this one, well, he's got the opportunity to stop them, but also he ends up sort of spurring it along a
mm,
bit, doesn't he?
mm.
So yeah, there was a lot in this to like. And I can see why it's a classic of and so well
Yeah,
regarded,
mm,
um, and it feels like a great Fifth Doctor performance by Peter
oh,
Davison
definitely.
and
Yeah,
really kind of um, uh, gives him a lot to do.
yeah,
And,
and
and
Nyssa as well. Actually,
yeah, I was just
who's
going to say,
pretty
and
badly
in fact,
served on TV, to be honest.
yeah, I like her. I never disliked her, but yes,
Mm,
exactly. I felt she had a lot more to do in this.
yeah, yeah.
And I wondered when this took place
Ah, I can help you there. It would have took
because I have
place
a
between Time
yeah,
Flight at the end of season 19 and
yeah.
Arc of Infinity, which kicks off season 20.
Okay, so hence it's obviously after Adric and things. So
Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
there's
Because
another.
Tegan leaves at the end of Time Flight,
Yeah, I
and
wondered
then
why
she
she
comes
wasn't
back.
here.
They go
Yeah,
to Amsterdam after some indeterminate time, the Doctor and Nyssa,
yeah,
and look, oh, there's Tegan. Hello. So it's literally she hasn't left at all because she's
right.
in the next story. But there's that whole space between those two seasons where a lot of stuff can happen, and I would have loved to have seen a few adventures with just the Doctor and Nyssa,
Yeah, I
because
really
one thing
liked
Big Finish
them.
have done is really explore that dynamic between them. It's like,
Yeah,
they get along, but Nissa's not afraid to stand up and hold her ground, and she
no,
does it in a way that is very, very different to Tegan. Tegan would stand her ground because she just believes that she's right, even though she knows she's wrong, but she wouldn't be able to admit it, and she's stubborn that way. Whereas with Nyssa, it's a very strong moral standpoint she has, but there's also a tragic side to her character as well. From her dad being taken over by the Master and Keeper
mm,
Traken, and the fact she lost her mother and was brought up in with an evil, wicked aunt, and all kinds of stuff. She's had a rough old time, Nyssa.
yeah,
And yet she still holds firm to the good stuff that she believes in. She's a real moral rock in the stories that she's in,
mm,
even when the Doctor isn't always. It's
yeah.
it's quite an
There,
interesting
there's
dynamic.
the reason I wondered when it was set is because there's a story called Warzone /
Mm,
Conversion, which came out 2019, and that's a Fifth Doctor with Tegan and Nyssa and
yeah.
Mark.
Who?
Mark, I think he might be an audio only uh,
Yeah.
character, and that sort of is a Cyberman one again, and it
Mm.
deals a bit more directly, with the fallout from Adric dying.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
that must be set before Spare Parts is, but obviously
No, I don't know. I don't know
does.
if it can it? Because I mean, they can set it whenever they want, actually. But right, I mean, Time Flight, which happens after Earthshock, is literally seconds after it, because they're all shell shocked from Adric's death
Yeah,
at the start of that show. Tegan leaves at the end of it, so
yeah,
you've got that big space. So I'd have thought maybe after Arc of Infinity and before Mordrin Undead. So you could have an indeterminate amount of time with the Doctor, Nyssa, and Tegan just traveling together and meeting. What's his name? Mark.
yeah.
Seems a bit ordinary in some ways, Nyssa,
No, it's
Tegan, Mark.
it's short for something.
Is it?
Mark
Right.
or something. Yeah.
Uh,
Anyway,
is
that's quite a good story
it?
as
Oh,
well.
look out for it.
Yeah.
Is it a
So
happy story?
uh, no, it sort of
Uh,
starts a bit like it's a bit like one of those kind of Tough Mudder type competitions. They're all running in it, and then it all starts going a bit horribly wrong. As you know, it would
okay.
with Who.
Yeah.
So we've got some comments here to
Yeah.
read through. So Jason Thompson, who's at Jason_JTT, said, I think it's remembered rather for one scene and the general hopeless situation rather than being a particularly good story. But the scene of a partially converted Yvonne going home really shows the horror of the conversion process much more effectively than any TV story did. So yeah, I don't quite agree with Jason there on the bit about the story, but yes, that scene particularly is really
I think it's like we said earlier, isn't it? I think if you're going to level any sort of criticism at Mark Platt, it's that he doesn't seem to care much about story. It's all about, I mean, I'm sure he does actually, and that's probably the service.
Oh yeah,
but
it
does
the
tend to be
character
secondary, I feel, to all the other stuff which fills his narratives.
Now our friend Millie McKenzie, who's at Calbear Creates, said, I really love this. I haven't listened to many Big Finish because I don't really know how to process audio.
She did say that. She's on
so I get lost and confused, but this worked beautifully. It was really powerful and quite hypnotic with all the voices. Gail Wright, who's at Mealy Garage, she just said Spare Parts is very good, and I have listened to this one because
she has, brilliant.
Yeah, she hadn't listened to a huge amount. The Metal Whovian, James, who's at the Metal Whovian. If anyone knows the Metal Whovian, he's a big Finish fan, and often putting his mini reviews out of stories. One of my favourite Cybermen stories, he says, Metal Whovian, I'd like to know what your favourite audio Cyberman story is actually. Robot of Death, who's at Graham Ward 68, says absolute classic. I much prefer the Big Finish cyber stories to anything since the 60s, and this is one of the best.
Interesting.
Robot of Death. Is that why you call Robot of Death? Because you like Cybermen. At Loz the Vale Yard says it's just about the best Cyberman story ever, isn't it? And probably one of the best Doctor Who stories. Full stop. Disturbing, moving, and mournful. If I were to change anything about it, it would only detract rather than enhance. Gallifrey's Most Wanted at Gallifrey's MW Pod says a masterpiece, still one of the best Cybermen stories ever. Grumpy 2000, whose handle is at Grumpy 2000, but actually 20001, says overrated and the committee is impossible to understand. Yeah, I somewhat agree with that, but I think you've got to train your ears for it.
I love the sound of the committee.
It is a really good
artistically brilliant.
John Porter at JS Porter 1966 says one of my favourites, absolute cracker from start to finish. We got loads here on this one, Paul. It was great.
Yeah, this got quite a lot of engagement when we put this tweet out, which is a while ago now.
Yeah, it was end of Jan. Mester the Magnificent, who's at the Mester, just says wonderful. One of my favourite stories in any medium, and the definitive genesis of the Cybermen. I'd love to see it fully animated one day. It's definitely canon in my mind. Grumpy Git 2021 says one of the best Doctor Who stories ever. 10 out of 10. Keith Say, he's quite right here. Well written, but unrelentingly grim.
Definitely.
Keith is at 50DW50, so he's not far wrong there. Olethros, who's at Ozymandias, says the best Cyberman story bar none. Kyle Wright, who's at Kyle Borgs, says it's most definitely brilliant. Kieran Cooper, who's at Kieran C 49120378, says was desperate to listen to it after such high praise, and my God, it delivered. So sad as well, nearly made me cry. First audio to do that. One of my faves. So we got loads here. So everyone who commented, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really liked it. Jason the Whovian Dude, that's a great name. At Jason_Dude76. This was the first Big Finish I listened to, and it's still one of my favourites.
Brilliant.
We'll share a link to these tweets.
Have a read.
Tons of them here.
We can't read them all out. For the one time we can't actually read them all out, we'll be here all day, won't we?
Yeah, Yeah.
But thanks to
So
everyone
yeah, that's
who
brilliant.
responded to that. It's interesting, isn't
Yeah.
it, that a story like this can touch so many people, mostly positive, despite the fact it's such a grim, dark story. But
Yeah.
I think this is
That's what I
probably,
meant.
I could be wrong here, but potentially more well liked than Platt's actual TV story Ghostlight. That always does seem to divide opinion, whereas the opinion on this story does seem to be mostly positive, actually.
Yeah, there was one or two
Yeah, one or two dissenters
negative.
perhaps, and
Yeah,
I perfectly
but
understand where
pretty
they're coming
minimal.
from.
Yeah. But yeah, Mark Platt, though, in fact, I saw a comment from Gallifrey 1 that just took place last weekend from Sylvester McCoy, and someone asked him about Ghostlight, and he said, I still don't know what it's about. You'll have to ask the writer.
That's right. Mark's under no illusions. He knows exactly what it's out. You know, you listen to him in an interview talking about it, and you think, well, yeah, that's exactly what it is. You know, it's plain as day. Yeah. What's difficult about it?
Well, thanks very much for joining us, everyone. As always, we'll be our next episode following this will be out in another week or so.
Indeed.
So check that out. Or if you're listening out of sequence, we hope you're enjoying what you're hearing, and you'll stick with us as we continue to explore the Doctor Who universe.
Thank you for your contribution to our podcast. Please keep listening.